Sometimes life closes a chapter you never wanted to end. But what if that ending was never a tragedy, only the beginning of something greater? This is the story of a man who lost everything, only to discover the power of starting again. When it felt too late. The clock struck midnight in a small, dimly lit room of a fading apartment in Mumbai. Arjun Mehta sat silently, surrounded by cardboard boxes filled with fragments of a life he no longer recognized. Trophies from a decade-long career, framed photos of happier times, a half-written novel covered in dust. Tomorrow, his company would officially shut down. 20 years of effort, sacrifice, and sleepless nights, all erased by a single corporate decision. He had always believed that success was permanent if earned with honesty and dedication. But that night, as the city lights flickered outside his window, he realized how fragile everything truly was. Arjun wasn't just losing a job. He was losing his identity. He stared at his reflection in the window, the tired eyes, the gray strands, the hollow expression. For the first time, he whispered to himself, "Maybe this is the last chapter." In the following weeks, Arjun tried to hold himself together. He sent out resumes, reached out to old colleagues, and smiled at neighbors as if everything was fine. But deep down, he knew the truth. No one wanted to hire a 45-year-old man with an outdated skill set and a heavy past. The bills piled up. The fridge got emptier, and silence became his new companion. Every morning, he would sit on the balcony with a cup of tea, staring at the rising sun. That same sun he once chased with ambition and dreams. Now it felt like a stranger. His daughter Anya was studying in Delhi. She called often, her voice full of concern. "Papa, are you eating properly? Did you apply for that position I sent?" He lied every time. "Of course, beta. Everything's under control." But it wasn't. Arjun was sinking, slowly, quietly, into a sea of regret. He wondered if his life had reached its final page. One rainy evening, Arjun found himself at a local railway station. He had nowhere else to go, so he just sat there, watching people come and go, strangers chasing destinations, each carrying a purpose he seemed to have lost. That's when he noticed an old man selling tea near the platform, perhaps in his 70s, yet his eyes sparkled with unusual warmth. Despite the chaos around him, the man served tea with a smile that seemed immune to hardship. Arjun bought a cup and sat near him. "Long day?" the old man asked kindly. Arjun gave a tired smile. "Long life," the man chuckled softly. "Ah, so you've seen a few chapters then. But tell me, beta, why do you sound like the story's over?" Arjun sighed. "Because it feels like it is. Lost my job, my purpose, and soon, maybe everything else." The old man poured another cup of tea and handed it to him, free of charge. "You see this tea?" he said, pointing to the steaming cup. "It's made from the same leaves that were crushed, burned, and boiled. Only then does it release its flavor. Life is no different. Sometimes the crushing is what makes us worth something." Arjun looked at him silently. Unsure how to respond, the man continued. "I used to be a teacher once, before I lost my home, my family, and everything I thought defined me. But one morning I realized life hadn't ended. It had simply changed its handwriting." That line stayed with Arjun long after he left the station. Life hadn't ended. It had simply changed its handwriting. The next morning, Arjun woke up unusually early. For the first time in months, he didn't scroll through job listings or calculate overdue bills. Instead, he sat at his old wooden desk, opened his dusty notebook, and began to write. It started as a letter to himself, a confession of pain, fear, and helplessness. But soon it turned into something else. Words began to flow, not from his mind, but from somewhere deeper, a voice long forgotten. He wrote about loss, about faith, about finding meaning when nothing made sense. By evening, he had written 20 pages, raw, unpolished, but alive. He read those words and felt something stir inside, a tiny spark of hope. Over the next few days, writing became his therapy. He poured his memories into the notebook, transforming every scar into a story. He didn't write for fame or money or validation. He wrote because it made him breathe again. Weeks passed. Arjun typed one of his essays and uploaded it to a small online blog, almost anonymously. He didn't expect anyone to read it. It was just a whisper into the void. But one morning, he woke up to find hundreds of comments. This made me cry. I'm going through the same thing. Please write more. You helped me today. Arjun sat frozen, staring at the screen. For the first time in years, someone needed his words. Not his position, not his title, not his success. Just him, he kept writing. Each post found new readers. Each story reached new hearts. Soon an online magazine reached out, asking if he'd consider writing weekly articles. It didn't pay much, but it gave him something greater, purpose. The man who thought his story had ended was now helping others rewrite theirs. Yet even as his new life began to take shape, Arjun battled an invisible fear. What if this was temporary? What if it all vanished again? He avoided telling Anya. He didn't want to raise false hope. But deep down, he longed for her to know that her father was trying again. One evening, as he sat in the same corner of the balcony, he received a call. "Papa, my professor read your article today." Anya exclaimed. He said it changed the way he looks at failure. "I didn't even tell him you wrote it. He just found it online." Arjun's eyes filled with tears. He hadn't realized how far his words had traveled. At that moment, the fear began to fade. He understood something powerful. Beginnings never wait for permission. They simply appear when you decide to move again. Months later, Arjun received an email that would change everything. It was from a university in Bangalore. They were organizing a seminar titled The Art of Starting Over, and wanted him to speak as a guest writer. Arjun reread the email 3 times in disbelief. He wasn't a professional speaker. He wasn't even sure his story was worth telling. But something inside whispered, "Say yes." When the day came, he stood on stage before hundreds of students, young faces full of energy and uncertainty. His palms were sweaty, his throat dry. But when he began to speak, his voice found rhythm. He shared his failures, his fears, his nights of doubt. He spoke of the tea seller's wisdom, the power of writing, and the truth that endings are often disguised beginnings. When he finished, the hall was silent until it erupted in applause. Students came forward, thanking him for giving them courage to start again. That night, Arjun sat alone in his hotel room, overwhelmed. He realized that life had led him exactly where he was meant to be. Not to succeed again, but to serve through his scars. A few weeks later, Arjun received a letter from Anya, handwritten, just like he used to write to her when she was a child. "Papa, I used to think you were strong because you never gave up on your career. But now I know you're strong because you didn't give up on yourself. You taught me that endings are not failures, they're invitations to live differently. I'm proud of the man who started again." He held that letter close to his chest. Tears fell, not from sadness but from gratitude. The man who once believed his life was over was now living his most authentic chapter. Months later, Arjun returned to that same railway station. The rain was falling softly, and the scent of chai filled the air. He looked for the old man, but the stall was empty. A younger boy now managed it. "Where's the old man?" Arjun asked. The boy smiled faintly. "He passed away a few weeks ago. Said he'd lived a full story." Arjun stood there silently, staring at the empty corner where wisdom once sat. He whispered, "You were right, old man." Life did change its handwriting. Then he bought a cup of tea, smiled, and raised it slightly toward the sky. Years passed. Arjun became a full-time writer and motivational speaker. His first book, The Last Chapter, became a bestseller, inspiring thousands of people across the country. In interviews, he often said, "I didn't write this book to teach people how to succeed. I wrote it to remind them that failure is not the end. It's the punctuation before a new sentence." Everywhere he went, people shared their stories of loss and renewal. And Arjun listened, because he knew what it felt like to think your story was over. He often ended his talks with these words: "When life closes a door, don't stand knocking on it forever. Turn around." There's another one, slightly open, but waiting for you to notice. One evening, as the sun dipped beyond the horizon, Arjun sat by his window once again. The same window where years ago, he had whispered, "Maybe this is the last chapter." Now, he smiled and said softly, "No, this is just another beginning." He closed his notebook, took a deep breath, and whispered a silent thank you to life to the old man, to every failure that led him here, because sometimes the most beautiful stories are written after the last chapter. Moral of the story: every ending in life is secretly a new beginning. What you call failure may simply be life's way of redirecting you toward your true purpose. Start again, not because it's easy, but because your story deserves another chapter.